Hello students, welcome to the second class for refraction of light. I urge you to watch the video for the first class and then proceed into this video. Okay, so now that we are here, in the last class we covered a lot of concepts regarding experiments on light that are basically reflections and refraction, right? Okay, so what we did was we took a small assumption that light travels in the quickest path according to the Fermat's principle. And based on that, we actually derived the laws of reflection. We then jumped into the nature of light, how light travels in mediums, how light bends, and we actually figured out the phenomena of refraction. After figuring this out, we actually proved the laws of refraction, the Snell's law, following to which we observed a lot of things of why and how refraction can change the direction of light. What that will cause is we looked at refraction in plane surfaces. We then jumped into finding critical angles in mediums, finding total internal reflection. We actually looked at some uses of these, and finally we actually also talked about shifts, lateral uh, lateral shifts. Okay. In plane surfaces in glass slabs, we actually talked about lateral displacement, of how a light ray is actually parallel when it comes out. The emergent ray is parallel to the incident ray, but it is parallel. It is not exactly, it does not follow the same exact path, it is displaced. And this angle was actually called, and this distance was actually called the lateral displacement. Correct? Okay. We looked at shifts, we will talk more about this. We actually looked at a very interesting thing derived from the Snell's law. We called that refractive index. We actually looked into the absolute refractive index of a medium. We established the relations between them. Okay, so in this class, basically in the previous class, what we did was based on a single assumption, we built a lot of things. We built the map of refraction, right? This is the map of refraction till now. We will work further into this. We will extrapolate further of what we know, and we will see how we can learn more things. Okay, so the next thing is, so we by now we all know the Snell's law, right? What is the Snell's law? It says that the angle of incidence by the angle of refraction for any given two pair of media is actually always constant for any I and R, and this constant is basically the ratios of the speeds in these two media, which is termed as the refractive index of the second medium with respect to the first medium. That is all we know about the Snell's law. From the Snell's law and from the absolute refractive index, we actually also know this, that this is mu2 by mu1, and which is v1 by v2. Also, the absolute refractive index of the media is actually equal to the speed of light in vacuum by the speed of light in that medium, right? Okay, so we all know till this, right? These concepts were covered in the last class. So today we will just prove one more relation. Okay, so see, I had told you guys that light is a wave, right? So if light is a wave, so what's a wave basically? In mathematics, how we represent wave as we draw two axes, and this is basically a wave, right? A total crest and a trough is called a wave. This is actually the wavelength, right? We represent that by lambda. And what is frequency? Frequency is actually the amount of waves, total waves, passing through a plane, in any given amount of time per second, right? So the number of waves per second. So that is the frequency. We represent that in hertz, right? Okay. So what is the relation between the speed of light, the frequency, and the wavelength, right? So let's intuitively think, right? This is a wave, complete wave. this is represented by the wavelength. Number of waves, it is represented by the frequency. So actually the product of this will actually tell you how fast the wave is moving, right? It will tell you how fast it is moving. So if you know, suppose you have a train, right? If you know that one compartment is this much of a length, and from a tunnel these many n number of compartments pass per second. So basically the speed of the train will be number of compartment into the length of one compartment, right? Similarly, the speed of light v here will be equal to the frequency of light and the wavelength of light, right? Okay. One thing to note down here is that the wavelength and the speed of light can change depending on the medium, but the frequency will never change. Why? Because frequency is source dependent. So if you have a torch and you shine light, so the frequency is determined by the bulb here. So you have the energy passing. So the frequency will be same whatever the medium it is, right? The frequency will remain constant. And the wavelength and the speed changes in such a manner such that the frequency is always constant. Okay. So what we know? We know that the speed of light is actually the frequency of light into the wavelength of light. Okay. So what can we conclude from the Snell's law and from this equation? So Snell's law, firstly it says that this is absolute refractive index is C by V, and the refractive index between two medium is actually inversely proportional to the speeds, right? Okay, let's substitute values. So mu2 by mu1 here will be, so V1 is the frequency of light into lambda 1, V2 is frequency of light into lambda 2. So these two will cancel off. So what we get is mu is inversely proportional to lambda as well, right? Okay. From here, what do we get? Mu is equal to f into lambda, and this is equal to f into lambda dash. So lambda dash is the wavelength of light in a medium, and lambda is the wavelength of light in vacuum. So these two will cancel off. So what is lambda dash? Lambda dash is basically lambda by mu. So these two important relations will be needing a lot while solving sums, right? Also for your competitive exams, these are important. Also for your boards, they are important. So please note them down. Rewatch the video if you have any doubts still. Okay. Okay. So now we have basically covered all the theory that we need to know for refraction, right? That is basically what we need to know. There is nothing more theory related to refraction that is needed to know at this point of time for your levels, right? As far as your 10s are concerned, it is covered. Now what we'll do is, we will actually look at some more plane surfaces and we will look at some curved surfaces, right? So we already looked at rectangular glass slabs, rectangular slabs. Now we will look into something which is known as a prism, right? I'll tell you what a prism is. We will experiment with them. We'll experiment with prisms. We'll see how different concepts related to refraction, related to total internal reflection, how they are actually observed in a prism. We'll look into that. We'll then go into curved surfaces. We will actually talk about lens, concave and convex, right? We'll talk about these two lenses. And we will also look at how refraction basically controls this, right? What we observe. Okay. Starting off. Let us talk about prisms. So what are prisms? Imagine a pyramid structure, right? A pyramid structure like this, correct? So how can you define a pyramid structure? It has four triangular sides, right? It will be better if you see from the top. So you see, this is a triangular side, this is a triangular side, this is a triangular side, and this is a triangular side. And the base is actually a rectangle, right? Okay. So imagine this structure, a pyramid structure made up of glass, right? Imagine this made of glass. Now this is what we will call prisms. Now the understanding of the prism structure is important. Why? Because you will be using this in this chapter related to refraction and also in the later chapter of spectrum. Okay, so you will be needing this concept. So this is a prism. Okay, this said and done. We'll not use 3D, we'll just use a 2D object. Okay, let us say that this is a prism, right? Okay, this is a prism. Now what we are doing, what we are interested in doing is we throw light on the prism from one direction, right? We throw light from one direction. Let's throw it here. So you have a torch, you're throwing light in this direction, right? Now what happens is, in glass slabs we looked at, light was entering, it was coming out parallel. Why? Because it was coming out parallel because the surfaces, the entry surface and the exit surfaces were parallel to each other as well. So the light was parallel to each other as well. What we noticed was a displacement. So that we termed as lateral displacement. Now let us look at what happens here. Okay. So this is the normal. What will happen is light will bend towards the normal. It has bent towards the normal. Now again, while coming out, it will again bend away from the normal, right? Okay. So what would happen? What happened is, see, the original path of light was this. If there was no prism, it would have gone this way, and the refracted path is this, right? The refracted path is this. So the ray is displaced, correct? So we observe a displacement here. Also, we see that the angle has changed. It was traveling in this direction, now it is traveling in this direction, right? We call this angle the angle of deviation, right? We call this the angle of deviation, correct? We call this the angle of deviation. Now, what we'll do is, we have actually figured out how refraction worked at a prism, right? So if you have a prism, light enters. When light leaves, it is actually not just displaced, it is also deviated, right? So if your question comes that name a surface where the light is just displaced, you will name a rectangular glass slab. This is a plane surface. Okay. Now name a surface where refraction occurs such that there is displacement as well as deviation. So that should always be a prism or a lens. Later, if it's a curved surface, then it should be a lens. If it's a plane surface, it should always be a prism. Nothing else, right? Okay. So now let us look into how we can actually establish a relationship between the incident rays, the refracted rays, the angle of the prism. Okay, so this angle is actually called the angle of the prism. Let's forget mentioning that. This is called the angle of the prism. Okay, so the prism is made of glass, so the triangle will have an angle, right? So this top angle is actually termed as the angle of the prism A. Right? Keep this thing in mind. Okay. So now let's define some variables, right? Let's define some variables. Okay. Keep things smooth. Keep things smooth. I will actually turn them, right? So let us first turn the point of contact. So this point, let me call it as P, right? These two normals meet here. Let's call this point Q. Okay. Let this point be called M, and let this point, let be called N. Okay. These are all the points of contact here. Okay. Now let's define the angles. Let's call this I1. So incident ray. This is the refracted ray R1, right? Just a second. This is the refracted ray R1, correct? Now this angle I1 and this entire angle are equal, right? So what's this angle? This angle is basically delta 1. So if your light was moving this way, it is now deviated this way. So this is the deviation angle, right? So we'll call this delta 1. Okay. Similarly here, let us name this. Okay. Let us name this. Let us name this R2, right? And let us name this angle I2, right? Why we chose this type of nomenclature? Because we wanted to keep the ratios in one manner, right? So we wanted to keep mu2 by mu1 is actually equal to sin I by sin R, right? Sin I1 and sin I2, sin R1 and I1, sin I2 and sin R2, right? Okay. Okay. With this said and done, next thing is this entire angle, this delta is basically okay. So this angle is also delta 2, just from the similar assumption. Light was moving this way, now it is moving this way. So the angle here, this angle is delta 2. So by alternate angle property, this is also delta 2. So what we know? We know that delta is equal to delta 1 plus delta 2. Correct? Okay. We also know that I1 equal to delta 1 plus R1. Also, I2 is equal to delta 2 plus R2. I guess you guys are following till here. Okay. If this is true now, let us finally look into the rhombus, right? PMNQ. Okay. Let us look into the rhombus. So we know that the alternating sides, always sum up to 180 degrees. Correct. They always sum up to 180 degrees. In a rhombus, when you have alternating sides, that is the angle of the prism A and this angle, they sum up to 180 degrees. Let's call this angle PQN. So this is 180 degrees, right? Sum of alternating angles in a rhombus is actually equal to 180. Okay. So from this equation, angle PQN is 180 minus the angle of the prism A. Correct. Okay. Now let's look into this triangle. Let's look into this triangle PQN, right? Let us look into this triangle. In this triangle, you have three angles, R1, R2 and this angle PQN. So we know that the sum of angles in a triangle is actually also 180 degrees. Correct? Okay. So angle PQN plus R1 plus R2 is actually equal to 180 degrees. Right? So angle PQN is 180 minus R1 plus R2. Now equating these two equations, we can very well write this as A is actually equal to R1 plus R2. So no matter what your angle of incidence is, the angle of the prism will be always equal to R1 plus R2. Always, right? We derived an important concept here. Okay. This does not end here. Okay. We determined some other things as well, right? So the total angle of deviation delta, was equal to delta 1 plus delta 2, and from equations it was delta 1 was I1 minus R1 and delta 2 was I2 minus R2, right? Okay, so grouping them, I1 plus I2 minus R1 plus R2 was delta, right? We also derived that this R1 plus R2 is A, so delta plus A is basically equal to the incident ray, the incident angle and the emergent angle, right? I named it like this so that it is easy to remember, right? Okay. Keep this in mind. This is a very important concept related to prisms. So when you have a prism with an angle A, when light enters and light leaves, the deviation and the angle of the prism is actually equal to the incident angle and the emergent angle. Remember this. Okay. One last thing. If we actually plot a graph for this, we'll see that let the y-axis be delta and this angle be angle of incidence I, right? We see that this curve takes a curve, right? So if you have a single point, it will result in I and E. So what will be the minimum delta? The minimum delta will be where these two angles are equal, right? So you will have the minimum delta when I and E are equal. So this will be 2I is actually equal to angle of the prism plus delta min. You will have some sums related to this. So it is actually important to know this, okay? So you will have minimum deviation only when the angle of incidence and the angle of emergence are equal, okay? Okay. Okay, so we have covered a lot today in this class. We have covered a lot about refraction, right? Furthermore, let us actually see what we can. Okay, we had a concept remaining, we had a concept lagging behind. We actually talked about real depths, but I actually gave out the formula without proving to you guys how it came. So let us look into apparent depths and real depths. Okay, real and apparent depth. What is this concept? See, suppose you have a friend in a pool, right? You have a friend in a pool and you are standing near the pool and you see that his legs appear shorter, right? You have obviously noted this. If you are standing by the pool, you will see that the pool is shallower than it actually is. Why does this happen? This happens because of refraction again. How? So when object is in a denser medium, it throws out light and it deviates away from the normal when it goes to the rarer medium. So when your eyes catch this, it actually backtracks the ray to get the source of light and it sees that source of light is here while the source of light is actually here. So this depth is actually called apparent depth, this depth is called the real depth, and the difference in their depth is called the shift. It's called the shift, right? Okay, you have noted this down. It generally comes as your board exam question. You are given some certain marks for this. Okay, so let us prove this, right? So we are actually using the concept of triangles and trigonometry to, let me draw just the rays. Okay, so with the normal, this angle is I, so this angle is also I. This angle is R, so by that logic, this is also R, right? Okay, basically we had done this. So this is R, so this is also R. These two are parallel, right? Okay, now let's define this triangle as P O Q, right? So drawing out that angle, drawing out the triangle P O Q like this. This is I. We have a bisector here. This is R. Let's name this point as X. right? Okay, so now what? Now what? As the angle is less, we can actually assume that tan theta is actually sin theta, because there will not be a much of difference between the perpendicular and the hypotenuse here. Okay, okay. Now tan I, so let's call this distance capital D. Let this distance be A and this entire distance be small d. Okay, so what is tan I? From trigonometry concept, it is dy small d. What is tan R? Tan R is basically dy small a, right? From these two equations, you can very well write this as sin I is just d by d, sin R is just dy small a, correct? Now what's the refractive index of the medium with respect to air? It will be sin I by sin R, and this will result in, sorry, I have actually written the medium reverse. So yeah, so this is the refractive index of the medium with respect to air. This is sin I by sin R, and this is d by small d by d by small a. This cancel off. So basically, apparent depth A is the real depth d by the refractive index, correct? You also saw it for the wavelength, right? So the wavelength was actual wavelength by the refractive index of the medium. Similar, because this is also distance, this is also distance. So the apparent depth is actually the real depth by the refractive index of the medium, correct? So what is shift? Shift is basically the real depth minus the apparent depth. So it is d minus d by mu m, right? So we can write this as, we can take d common, and it will be 1 minus 1 by mu m, right? Okay, so you can replace this by the denser medium and the rarer medium. Okay, so this is the shift. Now what does shift depend on? Obviously it will be dependent on the refractive index. It will also depend on the wavelength, what wavelength you are using, because the wavelength you are using actually determines the angle of deviation. We will learn that in the spectrum chapter. And also the thickness, right? Thickness also matters, right? This actual distance also matters. If this d is larger, then it will be affected here, right? It will be affected here. Okay, so that is basically, we have covered everything with plane surfaces refraction. The only thing left is, we are left to experiment out with prisms, right? So we will take some prisms, we'll look into how we can cause deviation for our purposes, right? Useful deviations. So the next topic is useful deviations in prisms, right? Useful deviations in prisms. Okay, first things first. Suppose I have a 90-degree prism, right? I have a 90-degree prism. Now, if I throw light from this surface, right? From this surface, this is 45 degree, this is 45 degree. Okay, before starting off, we are actually clearing out two things. The prisms we are talking about, they are all made up of glass, pure glass, okay? And the critical angle for glass is actually 42 degrees, okay? It is not exactly 42 degrees, but it can be rounded up to 42 degrees, right? Okay, so what will happen if a ray hits the surfaces with an angle greater than 42 degrees? You will have total internal reflection. So we will also look at total internal reflection here. So these are the cases of total internal reflection. Okay. Okay. So ray is entering from the perpendicular, it is hitting the hypotenuse. So this is 90, so this is 90 as well. This is 45 because the sum is actually 180 in a triangle. So if this is 45, we have a perpendicular here, this is 90 degrees, so this angle is always 45 degrees, right? It is hitting greater than the critical angle, so it will be deviated, it will be totally internally reflected at 45 degrees, right? Okay, so you see that you have a 90-degree deviation. Okay, just looked into 90-degree deviation. Now one useful use is in, right, you can use this in submarines to actually view everything from underwater. So you have this structure, right? Light will enter. Okay, sorry. You have this structure. Light will enter, deviate. You have another one. You have another one, and this. So light enters from here, deviates here. Light enters. Okay. So this structure is a little long. Forgive my drawings. Yeah. I'll just clear it out and draw again. Right. So in submarines, what you can do is you can have this. Right. This is a in and this is a, okay. So light enters. Again drawing it wrong. Right. Yeah. Light enters here. It is deviated. Enters here. It is again deviated, and you can see the image. Right. They can be actually used in submarines. Okay. What if I want a erect image? Right. I still have this 90-degree prism. What I will do is now I will hit it from the base will be the hypotenuse will be lying down. The base will be here. The perpendicular will be here. I am throwing light ray. What it will do is it will bend towards the normal. Then it will bend. It will have total internal reflection here. It will come out here, and I'll see. Okay. Okay. Just a second. It will hit somewhere here. It will come out. It will come out here. Okay. So these angles will also be 45, obviously, because they are hitting from the perpendicular. So they are 45 angles. This angle will be hitting here. So what we get is, if this was a erect object, we will get a inverted we will get a inverted image. Okay. Similarly, if this was an inverted object, we would get an erect image. So we use this in cinema halls, right? The light is flashed through a prism so that you obtain erect image in your movie screens, right? Okay. Now, finally, if I hit the light from the, this is 90-degree again. If I hit light from the hypotenuse this time, what will happen is, see, suppose I have this. Okay, forgive my drawings, right? This is 45. It hits here. It comes out like this. It hits here, and comes out like this. So you have a 180-degree rotation, right? 180-degree deviation. The actual object was this. Now this object is like this, right? So you have a 180-degree deviation. Okay. So I honestly urge you guys to try out with 60 degrees and 30 degrees. You can also find your solutions in your book. I can very well show you guys this, but I want you guys to try it on your own because you will have a better understanding. Just make the prism. You have three sides, right? So the perpendicular and the base are interchangeable, right? So light either enters from here or from here or from here, from any three side, and then you actually figure out the path of light, right? Okay. Try it for 60 degrees and 30 degrees. This basically covers the entirety of the chapter on refraction in plane surfaces. We are left with refraction in curved surfaces. All the theories related to refraction are over. I urge you to again look into the videos properly in a chronological order. You'll get a much deeper understanding. This is, as far as I am concerned, this is far more enough than what you need in your books. Just refer to your books along with these notes, and you will get everything you need to know about refraction. Okay. Yes, you had fun. Thank you.